This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're broadcasting 2 hours daily from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Studio A. Tom is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota, and there's a link to your instructors on the website, USAPrepares.com. So if you need to refresh your memory or revisit something that you've heard on the broadcast or share with friends and family, just click on USAPrepares.com. You can click on Listen to Vincent at GCN, and you'll be able to download or listen live. You can listen on your phone. You can listen on the internet, and you can listen on AM, FM radio stations throughout the country. So meet up Monday, Ziggy's, 5:30, Springfield, Missouri. Sam Bushman's going to be on stage. He's going to be doing a live teleseminar. We're going to talk about the media, how it works from the inside, and questions and answers. And if you'd like to know how to get through the call screener, he's going to teach you how to do that. He's going to teach you how to get right through the call screener and get live on the air, the best way that he knows how to do it. He's been doing it for 20 years. So, astonishing information from my dear and trusted friend and veteran broadcaster, Sam Bushman. That's Monday at Ziggy's, 5:30. Now, last Monday, there were three of us on stage. Pastor Aaron Brummitt, he was on stage, and he told us a little bit about his story. Then Dr. Judy Wood and I were all on stage. And that's where I got a chance to meet Pastor Aaron Brummitt for the first time in person. We've talked on the phone several times prior to that. Now, Aaron is a pastor. He's a street preacher. He's a U.S. Army veteran of 8 years, a combat engineer. And he's been arrested. And he's facing jail time for doing two things: disturbing the peace and obstruction of justice. Welcome, Pastor Aaron Brummitt.
It's good to be on your show, Vincent. Thank you for having me.
It's great to be with you. Did I say anything that was inaccurate?
No, that's the story. Let's do it.
Pastor Brummitt, you're a 30-year-old guy, good-looking guy, handsome guy, and when you're on the street, you're well dressed. You do not look like a thug. You do not look like a panhandler. You're well dressed. You've got a collared shirt, a solid color, a tie, a vest. I mean, you're dressed for success. You're out on the street corner. You're preaching, and you have had many encounters with Springfield's finest uniformed police officers, and ultimately, a whole bunch of them, I believe maybe 10 or 12, came to say hello to you and put you in handcuffs and hauled you away. Can you tell us what's going on? Why are you causing... heck, I know that when I had to hire the city police to come to one of our Get Prepared Expos, I had to pay those guys a fixed fee of $25 an hour. $25 an hour. So if you have if you have 10 of them come just to say hello to you, we're burning $250 an hour for them to say hello to you. What the heck are you doing that is causing so much attention in the city of Springfield?
Well, I'm going to give kind of the background here first of what brought us to the arrest, and that way, those that are listening, it's vitally important that we know what's going on in our country, and this relates primarily to the issue of the First Amendment, to be able to vocally stand up and be able to speak the truth in a open air environment. The ministry that I run is called Repentance Cry Ministries, and we just go out with the purpose of standing up in public areas and giving really short messages. We do a lot of singing with hymns. We've got men and women and children that sometimes come out and help with it, and we're not like, there are some groups out there that are very, very negative. We focus more on being positive. We have signs, crosses, wooden crosses we built to say Jesus loves you and things like that. But when we first began this, I wanted to make sure that we had a proper understanding between myself, proper communication between myself and the city. And what ended up happening, I began by sending them a fax which had some 40 or 50 court cases that upheld our freedom of speech, and we sent a fax to every major city official, the mayor of Springfield, the city council members, several boards, permit board, and we sent it also to the chief of police, the downtown coordinator of the police department, on down the line, prosecutors, the city attorney received a copy of the fax, and they ignored that fax. So here we are trying to communicate with them, trying to show them this is what the law says. We'd like to make sure we have a proper understanding with the city before we begin doing this sort of activity. And about 3 months passed. They were utterly silent. Not one person responded to our fax. And I ended up sending them a second fax, explaining to them, we've elected you into office. You're only there in office because the people have put you there, and here we are trying to communicate with you, and you will not even listen to our voice. And so I included the previous letter. Within an hour, that letter did the job. We had a call. I received a call from the city attorney, Dan Whitmer, and he said, absolutely, First Amendment allows you to do this kind of activity, and we want you to be able to do it, so we're going to put you in contact with the permit office, Chris Straw in the permit office, and we're going to make sure that you're able to exercise your First Amendment right. And so I sit down with the gentleman in the permit office, and he says, this is okay. You have to follow like 3 guidelines: not blocking pedestrians, don't use city power, and make sure decibel levels are within the city ordinance levels of around 75 decibels. And so, with that understanding, I knew that in the day and age we live, you have to document things. And so I said, would you please send me an email with the very same things we talked about in this meeting? And he sent me an email. Actually, it took him a while. It took quite a few days. I ended up sending their email. I said, I need to have this email. I'd like to have it. Finally, I ended up with an email with the what the city had told me, and I carried that with me everywhere I went when I was open air speaking, simply because I knew that was legal and that I would be able to use that to prevent oppression. It's amazing. The first Friday that we attempted this, to go out and sing and do some public speaking, we were immediately stopped by the police. Here I am with the permission from the city, police stopping me, stopped for about 20 minutes, pulled me down from where I was speaking, and actually were going to write me a ticket. He had a ticket out, ready to write. I told him, would you call the city? You need to correspond with them because I have permission by email to do what we're doing. After about 20 minutes total of us being halted from our activities, finally he let us continue. And it was from there that we proceeded for the next about 4 to 5 months to go out every Friday night to speak open air in a public area, business district. And it wasn't until December that there was last year, there was a change in the chain of command of the city structure. The mayor, during that time frame, resigned, which is very fishy in my eyes. And then a mayor we never voted for comes into power. And at that time, there was some changing going on also in the police department, so that the person who was overseeing the downtown district, the individual changed. And through all of this, they ended up not honoring their word. That's all we've wanted from the beginning, is just honor your word. Don't give us your word and then violate your word. And in December, they started ticketing us, which is when we contacted Alliance Defense Fund and got us in contact with Dee Wampler, who's representing the case. And so
fascinating.
There,
I'd like to go ahead.
From there, this is kind of the background so people understand that we have tried our very best to. We're very courteous people. We're not out to create problems. We really want to have good communication channels with the city, but they have from the very beginning violated that sort of communication by not responding to faxes, by not sending emails in a timely manner, and by then violating that word. The very first attempt, after we have permission, violating that by having police officers threaten to give us a ticket. And so from December on, we then come up more towards the present. We just continue to get tickets, violation of their word over and over again. We realized that it was getting very serious, and we knew that it was in the summer, in July, that it really started heading the wrong direction, and the city obviously instigating all of this. Instead of working with us, they chose to just violate their word continually. What happened in July, June and July, is when they began. They actually, one particular evening, we'd come out. I started taking a video camera with a decibel counter to see what levels all the concerts were at and all the other loud noise downtown. And we found video documented 4 concerts that were at over 105 decibels, which is above not only the city ordinance for their permit, but the city started creating permits that were against their own ordinance, saying they could have 100 decibels of volume. There's no ordinance that allows that, but they started writing permits with that kind of volume. And then these concerts, 4 of them, back-to-back, different days, were at over 105 decibels. And so
okay.
This is where...
Pastor, hold that thought. Hold that thought. We're going into a break, and we've got about a half a second delay between you and me. So we're going to have to take that into consideration. Pastor Aaron Brummitt, Springfield, Missouri. I'm Vince Finelli. This is USAPrepares.com. Pastor Brummitt was arrested. He's facing jail time. Class, Aaron Brummitt's with us. Pastor Aaron Brummitt. And we're talking about his arrest. And one of the things that he was arrested for was violating the city ordinance, disturbing the peace. And Aaron, you said that you had agreed to hold the noise level to 75 decibels or below. Let me just share with the class what that means. Normal conversation, just 2 people talking, is 60 decibels. 75 was the ceiling that you were allowed to reach. 85 decibels is average traffic. A rock concert is 110 decibels. The concert going on in Springfield that you measured was 105 decibels. And a loud, very, very loud macaw parrot, as Tom was telling me during the broadcast break, is 120 decibels. I mean, a jackhammer is about 110 decibels. So what we're talking, let's see, a jackhammer, about 120. Chainsaw is 100 decibels. So, and a jet airplane, about 130. So you were way, 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 way below all of that. And my understanding, Pastor Brummitt, is that when the police came, they literally stole your equipment. They took your decibel meter. They took your battery-powered PA system. And what else did they take?
They the first situation, which would have been in the summer, they took a Bible, a bunch of some literature that we had in a box. They took our decibel counter, so we could no longer count our decibels, and they took the They took over $500 worth of our church possessions without a warrant on that particular situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do they still have that equipment?
They do, and they were supposed to have returned it after that situation, and they have not returned any of the things they've taken.
Have you checked the local pawn shops to see if they've sold it?
Yeah. No, we have not.
Well, I'll tell you what. As this broadcast continues, I'd like you to, if you do, have some of the telephone numbers that maybe a little bit later, as we get toward the close of the broadcast, share with us some of the phone numbers, and maybe we can call the people involved and tell them that we've had it. We've absolutely had it. We don't like it, and we want your property returned, and we want the charges dropped and the case dismissed, because you're actually facing jail time for disturbing the peace and obstruction, right?
That's correct. And over $1,000 in fines, many thousands of dollars if you count now it's some 13 or 14 tickets that we have been written.
13 tickets, and are they all for, what are they for?
All of them are for, except for the last event, all of them have been for just peace disturbance, for exercising our First Amendment rights. And the last ticket that we've received was obstruction of justice, which is baloney. All they've done is they have written a obstruction of justice for us simply holding on to our possessions while they were stealing them. And so we stopped the police from trying to steal our possessions, and we get taken off to jail.
It doesn't sound like obstruction of justice. It sounds like resisting theft.
That's exactly right.
You know, Aaron, when you came to the meetup, I'd like to share this with our radio class. When you came to the meetup, people came, after you spoke for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, people came up to me privately and they said, "Where's his church? He's our guy. We need to go to his church," because they were so impressed with the fact that your church is not a 501c3 government regulated, locked down church, that you have resisted all that, and you're going to say whatever you want to say, and you're not willing to sign that contract with the government. And they were very, very impressed with how articulate you are, and your background as a U.S. Army veteran, a combat engineer, and you're a peace-loving guy, and yet you've gotten thousands of dollars worth of tickets. Your church's property has been stolen, and you are a staunch defender of the right of free speech, the amendments, the Constitution. We'll be right back. Class, Pastor Aaron Brummitt is with us, and he was arrested for preaching on the streets of Springfield, Missouri. And it's outrageous. He was arrested October 4th. Aaron, would you tell us a little bit about what that arrest was like?
Absolutely. On October 4th, we had gone out, as we had done for many, many months, on a Friday night to the Park Central Square area of Springfield, and we had a group of people that wanted to come out and help us with it. The location that we set up on was in the proximity of a concert that was going on. But we set up in a location the police had previously given us permission to be at 2 weeks prior at another particular concert. And so we set up at the location, began doing some singing and some open-air speaking. As soon as I began speaking, an officer named Sergeant Ringgold came up to me and asked us to move. He asked us to move to the location that we'd been at previously when $500 of our church possessions were stolen, robbed by the police. And so I told him I said, I'm sorry, we would rather not move to that location. This location we've been given permission previously to be at. If there's an ordinance in the city that says I cannot be on this public sidewalk, we will happily move. If you can find an ordinance. And I asked him to go make some calls, come back and see me, and if he could find an ordinance. I knew he wouldn't be able to, but if he could, we would have happily moved, even though it still would have been a violation of the First Amendment. He left. I continued to speak for a short time, and he came back without any ordinance and actually did not even approach me personally. He just walked straight over to our church possession. And I realized what was going to take place, and I realized that we couldn't do anything because they have the guns, they have the handcuffs, and they feel they can oppress people with that authority that's been given to them. And so I actually walked over and sat down on the possession, realizing they were getting ready to take them. And I was actually hoping, we'd had a plan previously that if that sort of thing happened, there was a gentleman in our group that was going to just, while I talked to the police, he was just going to take our small little 12 by 12 inch battery amplifier and walk away with it. But as soon as I sat down on it, this officer, in a very oppressive way, I could tell that he didn't like the fact that we were challenging their unlawful acts, and so they pulled me back. Several officers put me in handcuffs for simply touching my own possession. Never touched an officer. There was never a fight, never any violence. So I'm in handcuffs. Another pastor who is actually, he pastors a church just outside of Springfield and Seymour, Anthony Mays. He's a very soft-spoken gentleman. You never see him raise his voice, but he realized how unjust this was, and he walked over very, very slowly, put his hand on our possessions, and looked the officer in the eye, Sergeant Ringgold, and said, "This is unjust. You know this is unjust." So they pull him back to put another pastor in handcuffs for just talking to a police officer. I'm in handcuffs now. Another pastor's in handcuffs, and we realize there's nothing you can do. You're at the power and the control of the police officer, whether they want to keep the law or violate it. They have the handcuffs. It was very uncomfortable. I'd never been put in the kind of handcuffs they put me in, and they twisted my one hand sideways, my other hand the other way, and the handcuffs didn't have a chain running between them, so you were trapped in the position they put you in, and so my arm was all tweaked sideways. I'm sitting there calling out to a young Christian girl in the church who, her name is Erica Parker. She realized how unjust this was, and she wasn't going to let us go to jail alone. And so, bless her heart, she, sweetest girl in the world, she just grabs hold of the equipment and with a vice grip and will not allow them to take the church possessions. I began, on the video, you can watch this, I began calling out to her to just take the video camera because I didn't want her going to jail. I didn't want any woman to be treated the way they treated her. And so she just kept holding on to it. The officer, Sergeant Ringgold, almost breaks her fingers, ripping them off our own possession, stuff that belongs to us, that we paid our money for. And she tells the officer, "Why are you putting your hands on me? I've done nothing wrong. Why are you touching me like this?" And she then does take the video camera and starts videotaping everything that's going on. We thought she was going to be okay. There's no way they would oppress a female in the way they did. And while she's videotaping, on the video you can watch it, they walk up to her and tell her, "You're under arrest, put your hands behind your back." And so they then put her in handcuffs, rip her arms behind her back, put her in handcuffs, bruised her. We actually took pictures of the bruises. They actually physically harmed her and bruised her. And then she was crying. She was just, a very sweet girl. It was such a tragic thing to be happening. She just starts crying there on the spot. And because of that, it really hurt me inside. I mean, you can mess with me all you want, but when you start hurting other people, you've got a serious issue on your hand. As a soldier in the military, that is something that, for me, if I watch that happening, it makes me a whole lot more upset than I would be otherwise. And she then, bless her heart, begins singing hymns. She sang Amazing Grace. She stops crying and just realizes, well, I better rejoice. I mean, you're counted worthy to suffer with Christ. And so she begins singing, and at that point, I realized we had a huge audience around us, now about 100 to 200 people wrapped around us in a circle, just civilians, 12 police officers, pulled out to arrest two pastors and a sweet Christian lady, obviously the taxpayer money that wasted taxpayer money to oppress Christians. And I began actually just speaking, just my voice. I began speaking, just quoting some scripture to the audience. And as I was led away, the final thing that I was quoting was the hymn, "What Can Wash Away My Sins? Nothing But the Blood of Jesus." We're then taken over to a paddy wagon, I've never been in a paddy wagon. It's like an ice box. They had a dividing line for women and men. They'd throw Erica on one side, throw me and their pastor on the other side, shut the door behind us, and we're trapped inside this criminal paddy wagon. And Erica once again begins singing hymns. And so all the way to jail, we sang hymns, which I think really shocked the officer who opened the door and released us to take us into the jail itself. And so in the jail, we were there for most of the evening, and we had our mug shots taken, violation of privacy, iris scans taken, and we were arrested for obstructing an officer from stealing our possessions. And I just like the truth. That's what really happened. We were arrested for simply not wanting the police to take things that belonged to us without a warrant. On the way, being taken to the paddy wagon, we were never read our rights, our Meander rights. We were never given any of the legal rights that we should have had as citizens of the United States of America. And so the police officers violated the Constitution, state constitution, and a number of other laws in this unlawful act.
Well, let's see if we can get some of these cops involved fired for a lot of things. Number one, they're using handcuffs, but not just handcuffs. They just don't want to keep your hands behind your back. They want to torture you with these handcuffs. So they've got specially designed handcuffs to really make it painful. Now, it's not like that you were in a shootout with the police and you were a bad guy. You're just a preacher on the street corner. Now, obviously, someone called and complained about you because you must have been doing something that was competing with maybe some big business, or the police just have it out for you. But the bottom line is, you have a right to do what you did. And they do not have a right to arrest you, and they do not have a right to put you in torture handcuffs, the three of you. 12 cops show up to arrest 3 people in a peaceful demonstration. It's outrageous. So who are their names? Let's get these guys fired. Who are they?
Well, the head of this particular act was Sergeant Ringgold, so that would be the primary one we definitely want to focus on. But the chief of police is very much a part of this as well, Paul Williams, because he is responsible for allowing the officers to continue to oppress us over a long span of months.
Okay. Now, Ringgold, Ringgold?
Yeah.
Okay, Sergeant Ringgold. Do you have any telephone numbers for him?
No, but I've got a telephone number for his office, which I can give.
Okay. Which
is the Springfield Events Coordinator office. That number is area code 417-864-1810.
Okay. 417-864-1810. That's Sergeant Ringgold's, Ringold, his office. He needs to be fired, absolutely fired, for abusing and breaching the public trust, using handcuffs that he should not be using. He could say, listen, Pastor, I got a problem. Let's sort this out at the police station. Even that is over the top. Asking you to climb in and go for a ride with him would be way over the top, but putting you in these torture handcuffs is unacceptable. He needs to be fired. City Council of Springfield, I hope you're listening. You need to fire Sergeant Ringgold right now. Now, what about the chief of police? We need to fire him too. Paul Williams is the chief of police. Do you have a phone number for him?
The chief of police I've got a number here of 417-864-1797.
Okay, Chief of Police, Paul Williams, he needs to be fired. 417-864-1797. 417-864-1797. Now, what number is that? Is that his office number?
That, I believe, is either his office or home number.
Oh, okay. His home or office number, 417-864-1797. Chief of Police, Paul Williams, he needs to be fired. Now, next we're going to get the city council. We're going to get the city council involved, and we're going to make sure these guys get fired. We want people who represent us and protect and serve, not haul us away and torture us. That's what we want. We're sick of it. Sergeant Ringgold, you're on notice. We want you gone. We want you fired. Chief of Police. Here's a special announcement for Sergeant Ringgold and Chief of Police, Springfield Police Department, Paul Williams. I'm going to give out a telephone number. I'd like you to call me and tell me your side of the story. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Let me give that to you again. 866-582-9933. Give me a call, and we'll put you on the radio, and you can tell us your side of the story as to why you handcuffed two pastors, stole their equipment, won't give it back to them. And class, let me tell you this. Here's your assignment for right this very minute. I'd like you to put both hands behind your back and the backs of your wrists together, okay? And I want you to just sit there. Just put your backs of the wrists together with your hands behind your back, and let's do that for the next 10 minutes. And let's see what that's like. Now, that is the position that your hands are going to be in if Dutch handcuffs were used on you. Those are the handcuffs that don't have a chain between them. There's an immovable mechanism between the right and left hands, so you cannot turn your hands at all. They are locked in that position, and you're against steel, pretty sharp edges, not sharp enough to cut you, but very, very uncomfortable. I'm outraged that they would even own such a device of torture in the city of Springfield, Missouri. And just for that alone, just for approving the purchase of those handcuffs, the police chief, I believe, Paul Williams, should be fired, and so should Sergeant Ringgold for deploying them. Just for that alone. Aaron, when's your court case? We need to pack the courthouse.
The first court date we're going to have, which we definitely would be very grateful for anybody who would come and be a part of just letting the city of Springfield know that this is utterly unacceptable and detestable in the Bible Belt to be taking place. The first court case is December the 13th. It will be in the municipal court in Springfield, and that would be we would be very grateful for those that would come out and support.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I mean, all you have to do is sit there. Even if you think Aaron should go to jail for preaching on the street, I think you ought to hear this. I think you ought to see what happens because, class, you're next. You're next.
That's right. We one of the things that I mentioned in the meeting we had Monday, it's important to understand that this freedom that is being taken right now from those that are religious people. I understand there are many people from different types of religions on the program, and we're for everybody having a voice. This is not just the Christian voice. It's for everybody to have the freedom to be able to speak, and we respect every other person who exercises that right equally. The issue here with this particular situation is that we want to be empirically equal. So we've gone out and to see what everybody else gets to, what kind of volume they get to use. We're more than happy to be much lower than them, but yet the only person who's getting arrested and getting ticketed is the Christian in the situation. And so it's completely about the fact they don't want certain messages, not just religious messages, but political messages. There's messages they would much rather not spoken politically on the street corner. And someday, when it comes time for the police to be putting people into train cars and taking them off to concentration camps, you're going to wish that you stood up for the freedom of speech now, Because when it comes time to stand on the street corner and speak the truth and nothing but the truth, and that freedom is missing, you'll have very little ability to spread the information to other people about what's going on. And so we're really here to guard the freedoms of all people. We stand with the founding fathers. John Adams, I love what he said. He said, the jaws of power are always open to devour, and her arm is always stretched out, if possible, to destroy the freedom of thinking, speaking, and writing. There's people that do not want us out there speaking the truth. George Washington said, if the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to slaughter.
Class, if you'd like to contact Pastor Aaron Brummitt, there's a link on page 1 on the website, column 4 on the bottom. It says Pastor Aaron Brummitt, street preacher, Springfield, Missouri. Wow. Let's pack the courthouse and let's show them that we are not going to yield our freedom of speech in the United States of America. Springfield, Missouri, December 13th, Municipal Courthouse. Be there. I'll keep announcing it. Pastor Brummitt, thank you so much for being with us. I'm Vin Finelli. Please stay tuned for hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? This is hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. And I'm delighted to have back in the broadcast classroom with us today Dr. Judy Wood. Dr. Judy Wood has done 2 broadcasts with us. We talked about where did the towers go. We're talking about 9/11. Where did those towers go? We learned in the first 2 broadcasts that the towers turned to dust. A new term, dustification. And if you look at the images on the internet, you will see that the towers did go to dust. Now, Dr. Judy Wood wrote a book, a 500-page book. I would call it an encyclopedia of what happened. This is the evidence. It's the evidence of what happened, and it goes through in detail hundreds and hundreds of photographs, what happened. I'm delighted to continue this broadcast. It will probably take a total of 16 one-hour broadcasts to get through where did the towers go. Welcome, Dr. Judy Wood.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It's always delightful having you on this broadcast classroom, Dr. Judy Wood. You know, I'm looking at your book, and by the way, class, all of the copies that I had available for sale for $40 a piece are gone. So if anyone would like a copy and you want to pick it up at the meetup, what Dr. Judy Wood has agreed to do is to autograph them. She's autographed the books and shipped them to me at my farm, and then I bring them to the meetup, and they're $40. They're $40. That includes all the costs. No additional handling, nothing like that. It's $40, and they're autographed. So I have a feeling that this is something that, if you want one, you'll treasure it for the rest of your life, and you'll want to pass it on. And I keep my copy in the studio. It's that important to me. Dr. Judy Wood, the last time we discussed the bathtub, and that's the term that you're using to describe the basement, if you will, of the towers, and how it seemed that not much damage happened to the bathtub. Why don't we start with that and then continue on about, well, the evidence of very little damage, and then the workers. Seems like they rushed to repair a huge hole in the bathtub. Let's start with that, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, it was the bathtub. Well, some people call it the slurry wall because that's how they originally made it. Out of slurry, and then to make it, it's essentially a dike that goes around the basement because the bedrock was 70 feet. That's 7 times 10, 70 feet below the water table. So if you're going to build a tower on bedrock, it's got to be underwater. Well, unless you build this dike around it. And I call it the bathtub. A lot of people do, but initially people referred to it as the slurry wall. When the towers were destroyed, went away, there wasn't a big flood throughout Manhattan, and there would have been underground because all of the subway tunnels connect in there. On the bedrock, 70 feet below the water table, that's where the PATH train station was. And the PATH train, that's the Port Authority Trans-Hudson, the subway. It was built in early 1900s. I think the station first opened in 1908, 1909, somewhere around there. And that was further inland, it was right up on the shore. And when they built the towers, because the towers were now, expanding Manhattan, they're now out in the water, they, with a dike around it, they moved the PATH train station to the bathtub. So it had to make that tight turn. If anyone's been there, they know how tight that turn is to go around. Know what station they're at because of how tight the cars are turning. Mm-hmm. So if 2 500,000-ton buildings slammed down on it, it would surely rupture it. And if it ruptured it, you would have had a whole lot of flooding going on. And the subways are also below the water table. So it didn't flood. Now, there was some damage, but it was not damage caused from the buildings smashing down on it. It was caused by the mega cranes that came in. And, they had to bring about new rules when they quickly discovered that the walls were moving inward because of these heavy cranes sitting outside the walls. Because the walls were now unsupported on the inside because there was no building inside. Mm-hmm. But the buildings themselves supposedly crashing down, did not damage it. I'm not saying zero damage. Could have been some scratches here and there. You'd be surprised what debunkers like to claim as, debunking. But there was no catastrophic damage. The bathtub was not ruptured. It didn't spring a leak. And actually, the PATH train tunnel under the Hudson, you'd think, this long snaking tube parked on the base of that bedrock in the basement of the towers, you'd think that when those towers smashed down that, it would shake that snake there out under the water, and it would snap or crack or something, especially if it was built in the early 1900s. And there was water down there, and they were concerned. Well, it turns out once they pumped the water out, there's no more water. Because when the bathtub was opened up, and they had all these fire hoses and rain dumping on it, it's ready to have to drain somewhere. And it went down into the PATH train tunnel. But once they pumped it out, it stayed dry. That's rather impressive. I'm not saying zero damage, but there was no catastrophic damage. The bathtub was not ruptured. And underground of Manhattan was not flooded.
So what we're learning is that you would think that there would be substantial damage to the bathtub from the building if it actually collapsed into it. If the whole weight of all stories of the World Trade Center towers collapsed into the bathtub, you would see substantial damage. But the damage was very minimal. That's what you're saying. Is that correct? Correct.
Mm-hmm. And there's pictures of it afterwards, after they cleaned out the bathtub, and you still see the original wall there with, the rusty tiebacks that they, when they were building it, when it had a slurry wall before it had the concrete poured in. That's on the Hudson side. And the other side is a big bathtub and there's a smaller bathtub. They're driving trucks to drive out. They're driving over the wall between the big bathtub and the small bathtub, and those damaged that wall. That was not from the destruction of the towers. So there was damage, but it was not caused by the bathtub smashing on it. Now, it did leave it unsupported because if you remove the building inside and that building was pressing against the wall, where on the other side you had dirt and water pressing against it, if you have nothing supporting on the inside, it is a predicament they had to be careful of. But it was the buildings itself smashing down isn't what caused the damage. And it was kind of surprising. In 2006, December 14th, I think it was, there was a meeting that some of the folks at NIST, that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they were having this meeting to discuss what may have happened to Building 7, because they still hadn't come up with a good story yet. And there's piping that goes underneath the Towers 1 and 2 over to Building 7, which is on the other side of Vesey Street. Some people call it Vesey. It's on the north side of it. And it goes through the bathtub wall. So you'd think if you have Towers 1 and 2 smashing down on that piping system, you shear off the pipes.
Sure. Or at least damage them or rupture them.
Right. And it's such a shock when I heard them actually state this in this meeting, saying, well, it wasn't of any seismic significance to have caused any damage to the piping system under the Towers 1 and 2 that went over to Building 7. Because they're talking about the fuel lines and so forth, that if that's what caused the fire over at Building 7. But they ruled out the, quote, collapse of 1 and 2 as having damaged the piping system. It's not seismically significant to cause any damage.
Absolutely amazing.
There's something wrong with that.
Dr. Wood, I'd like to share with you, many years ago, I was interested in buying a farm. And on this farm, there was a basement that was dug out, but a home was never built onto this basement. So it had poured concrete walls, at least 8 to 10 inches thick, probably 10 inches thick, with rebar in it. But there was no home built on the basement foundation. So there was a basement floor, concrete walls, and as I was looking at it, the realtor said to me, "No, you can't use that basement. Even though it's in a good location, you can't use it because it's been sitting with no building on top of it, and it's damaged. The structure is damaged, even though it was only maybe 3 years old." So what we're talking about is the outside pressure exerting against the walls, pushing inward to an empty basement, not supported on the top, ruins it. And that's what you're talking about.
Exactly, because you don't have that cross bracing going across the top because you don't have a house on it.
Okay.
So
now at this point, do we move on into the seismic impact?
Sure, that's an important thing. And I'd just like to remind people, this is not a theory. This is evidence. If you're going to find out how tall somebody is, you don't start with a theory. You start with a measuring tape and go measure it. You don't need a theory. As a matter of fact, a theory is worthless in terms of determining how tall somebody is. Now, if you're going to talk about the Big Bang theory or theory of evolution, things that you cannot go back in time to go measure, or you have a working case scenario, which is the best you can come up with, but you can't go measure it. Well, we can go measure these things, what happened on 9/11. We have evidence that we can make conclusions of. We can't find out every single detail, but we find plenty enough to make a conclusion. And another thing I'd like to stress is know what it is that you know, and know that everything else you don't know.
Dr. Judy Wood's with us. I'm Vincent Finelli. This is USAPrepares.com. Class, if you want to go to page 1 of the website, USAPrepares.com. Page 1, top of the page, Where Did the Towers Go? By senior USAPrepares.com instructor Judy Wood. And you can click on that. It'll take you right to our website. Class, we're talking with Dr. Judy Wood, and she's written the encyclopedia, as I refer to it, Where Did the Towers Go? And absolutely brilliant publication. If you're really interested in what really happened and how big the misrepresentation can be of one of the biggest events that's ever happened in this country, Where Did the Towers Go? And you can go to USAPrepares.com, page 1. You can click on the post about Dr. Judy Wood. You can click on that. It'll take you to her website. And if you'd like, you can order the book. Or if you'd like, you can email me that you'd like one. I'll have it shipped to me, and I'll bring it to the meetup, and you can get an autographed copy that way. It's $40. Dr. Judy Wood, we're talking about the seismic impact. Let's continue with that.
Sure. As part of that seismic impact, you would expect the windows in the buildings adjacent to the towers to be cracked. If you have an earthquake, the ground shakes, the buildings around kind of shake like a parallelogram or get bounced up and down, and that puts a lot of stress on the windows. And there weren't cracks diagonally up the windows so much. There was like round holes in the window. It was strange. So we're just noticing these strange things with it. But as for the quote, impact, few people realize that January 17th, 2001, just earlier that year, there was a Midtown Manhattan earthquake, and it was approximately the same scale as what the shaking of the ground when the North Tower, Tower 1, went away. Won't say collapsed, but it went away. It was approximately the same, but the comparing the two signals, they look very, very different. There's three basic types of seismic signals, or seismic waves. There's the P wave, which is like, snapping a rubber band. You stretch it and you let go of it. It gives an impact, or like hitting a rock with a hammer. There's a direct wave that goes through the material. Through the material. And then there's an S wave, which the motion is perpendicular to the line of travel of the wave. Think of a jump rope, wiggling it back and forth. Right? It shakes the ground sideways and as it travels longitudinally. Then there's a surface wave. Now, if you get up off your mattress in the morning, you've been waiting down on that mattress all night. When you get up, the mattress comes back up and recovers. Or getting off the sofa, it bounces back up. That's a surface wave. It doesn't travel necessarily through the material. And it's not an S wave or a P wave. It's a surface wave. As it turns out, most earthquakes have all three kinds. The Midtown Manhattan earthquake earlier that year had all three waves present in it. So we know that bedrock transmits those three kinds of waves to the recording stations, and there's quite a few recording stations in the area. But on 9/11, there was no S wave or P wave recorded in association with any of the events. There's 5 events. The North Tower got a hole in it, an airplane-shaped hole, and the South Tower got an airplane-shaped hole. Then the South Tower went away, the North Tower went away, and then Building 7 went away. None of those events had a corresponding S wave or P wave, only surface waves. Now think about that. Now imagine King Kong reaches over, grabs one of these towers, just chucks it up in outer space, taking that weight off the ground like you get up off of your mattress. That's going to cause a surface wave, just removing that weight. Because you've had this 500,000-ton building sitting on the bedrock, now it's no longer sitting on the bedrock. And when the North Tower went away, that surface wave only lasted for 8 seconds. In a vacuum, it takes like 9.5 seconds for something dropped from the roof to hit the ground in a vacuum. Houston, we have a problem. Because how can you have a building go away faster than the free fall of something dropped off the roof? Well, the only way that can happen is if the building does not slam to the ground, if it turns into dust in midair.
Dr. Judy Wood, we're talking about 9/11, and we're talking about dustification. The buildings turned to dust, and we're going through the evidence. We're going through the seismic evidence. We're going through the bathtub, and we're talking about things that did happen and things that didn't happen. You would expect more damage in the bathtub than we saw. We'll be right back. Imagine having an overdue ticket and being arrested, strip searched, and put in jail for an overdue ticket. It happened in Texas. Unbelievable. Richland Hills Police put a woman in jail and strip searched her for an overdue ticket. It's out of control. Absolutely out of control. So if you heard my anger in the previous hour about Pastor Aaron Brummitt being arrested and put in torture handcuffs, that's where that anger comes from. We are being abused, class. Absolutely. All over the country. Dr. Judy Wood's with us, and we're talking about 9/11. Where did the towers go? And Dr. Wood, you talk about the Kingdome, Kingdome, in Seattle, Washington. That's a structure 660 feet in diameter, and it was demolished in March of 2000. And you compare in your book that demolition, the seismic event relating to that demolition, to the World Trade Center towers, which were 4 times heavier.
Oh, not 4 times. The towers were 30 times the potential energy. They were, because it's whatever height that weight is centered at. Mm-hmm. So if you put it at the center of the building, drop that weight, boom, down to the ground. The higher you hold it up and drop it, the bigger the thud is going to hit with the ground with.
Yeah,
I'm
with you there. I'm just looking at the weight, 130,000 tons versus 500,000.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not so much the weight that counts, because you can put it in pancake, flatness right against the ground, and it's not going to be doing much. But it's the height of it that really counts. Yeah, and the Kingdome was like this ring of concrete that's really big, but it wasn't that tall. I think, 230 feet tall, something like that. This is from memory. But for comparison of how long it takes to drop a bowling ball off the roof of the towers, about 9.5 seconds, and how long it takes to drop a bowling ball off the roof of the Seattle Kingdome. And that's just under 4 seconds, like 3.9 something. So you would expect, if, they were similar, that the ground would shake for less time on the Kingdome, right? No, it doesn't happen that way. The ground shakes for 2 or 3 times longer for the main part of the shaking. And then it goes on for almost a full minute. Now, something else about, the S waves and the P waves. The P wave's the first one to arrive, the primary wave, and it's a low amplitude, high frequency. And I think we're all taught this in high school science class, that you see then this high amplitude wave come in, that's the S wave, and it arrives later because it travels more slowly through the material. And knowing the difference in the speeds with which they travel through the rock or the earth, you can tell how far away the epicenter is from your recording station. And the Seattle Kingdome, which was above ground, when it came down, it had you can see the lag time from the P wave arrival and the S wave arrival, because it produced both S waves and P waves when it was blown up. But the towers, there's no S wave or P wave, only surface wave, which is really peculiar. If you get a hammer and hit a rock, it sort of rings like a tuning fork. By the time it gets to you can tell how long it takes to get to the seismic station. But the towers had this weight much higher up than the Seattle Kingdome. So it should make, if it's 30 times, 3 times 10, 30 times the potential energy. It's also, as you point out, heavier. So it should make at least the same impact, right? The South Tower made less of an impact, measured by the surface wave, and the North Tower the same. But the quality of the wave was very different. The Seattle Kingdome was much like the Midtown Manhattan earthquake, the S wave, P wave, and surface wave. And the P wave arrives before the S wave. But the surface wave, it's a much lower frequency. You can count, like about 9 waves, in the 8-second time period, approximately that many. It's a very low frequency wave, and that's just from the weight being lifted off the ground. So what's the difference here? Also, there was a gas storage facility on the New Jersey side, right across the Hudson from where the towers were located. Mm-hmm. And somebody went, oops, made a mistake. I don't know if they're smoking a cigarette, and they overfilled the thing, and it caught on fire and exploded. That was a 3.0 on the Richter scale, which is greater than the towers or the King Dome. It also made an S wave and a P wave. So it's not that something blows up above ground that keeps it from making S wave or P wave, because here we have controlled demolitions that make S waves and P waves, or an explosion above ground. So that wouldn't explain why the towers didn't make an S wave or P wave. Also, the impact, or whatever it was, when the building got the airplane-shaped hole, the North Tower got an airplane-shaped hole, and the South Tower got an airplane-shaped hole, those didn't make an S wave or P wave either. Only surface waves. And it damped out, pretty quickly. But as we pointed out before, the ground only shook for 8 seconds during the time that the North Tower went away. But it takes much longer than that to drop something from the roof to have it hit the ground. So it could not have hit the ground. So that's proof in itself that the building did not slam to the ground but turned into dust in midair. Another proof of that we saw was with the bathtub being still intact. So it was still keeping out the Hudson River. It wasn't, catastrophically damaged. And it would have been if you had 2 500,000-ton buildings slamming to the ground. So the only explanation for that you can think of is it didn't slam to the ground. It turned into dust in midair. So the seismic season, also going back to the Seattle King Dome, the ground shook for quite a while. It wasn't just, it had an S wave and a P wave and a surface wave, but also the ground shook for quite some time. There's a lot of people who think that the towers were brought down with controlled demolition because they heard an explosion. Well, hearing an explosion doesn't mean there's a bomb. Put an egg in your microwave and you'll find out. Eggs blow up in microwaves. It doesn't mean it's a bomb in your microwave oven.
And it does. So it does make a loud sound.
Right, and it makes a sound.
You bet.
But if the towers are coming apart, think of everything that's in there. If it's turning to dust, you have air tanks, pressure tanks, you have water tanks. You have to pump water up in stages. They pump it up to a holding tank. From there, they pump it up to another holding tank, and from there to another one, because you can't pump water from the ground a quarter mile up. There's too much water head to pump. So, and also your tanks would siphon out immediately. So they pump it up into stages, and somebody I know who worked there said they usually pumped it at night. You hear water going up. But you have these pressure tanks, water tanks, because you have a lot of water in there, pressure tanks. They're pressure vessels. If you start weakening the wall of a pressure vessel, it's going to get to a point where it can't hold in the pressure anymore. It's going to explode. It's going to rupture. So it's reasonable also, wherever you have a water tank, that it'd be rupturing, and you'd have water spraying out all over. And we did see that. I don't know if that is indeed what that was, but it could very well be. It wasn't a bomb kind of explosion. Those squirts that you see coming out of the building, they don't go very far. It goes like water to me. But there's a lot of things that could be cutting loose. And there were, at ground level, firefighters, the only thing they could identify they knew was exploding was air tanks, like what the firefighters wear to breathe clean air when they're fighting fires in a smoked environment. They had extra air tanks on their fire trucks and in ambulances and so forth, and several of the guys witnessed those exploding. There's also some bullets that were in a policeman's glove compartment of his car in the parking lot, and they just started exploding. I read about that, and then I happened to have been watching a video on YouTube, and by golly, I heard them. It sounded like somebody shooting a gun. At first, that's what folks thought, but it was bullets in the glove compartment. That was in the toasted car park where those were. So we have various seismic signals that don't add up. And when you gets to Building 7, so many people say, oh, it was obviously a controlled demolition because it looked like one. Well, you look like the murderer, so let's put you on death row because, you must have done it because you look like. You need more evidence than just it looks like. It has to have a, seismic wave. And Building 7 had almost no seismic impact whatsoever. It was 6 times the potential energy of the Seattle King Dome. 6 times. But it made a 0.6 on the Richter scale, where the Seattle King Dome made a 2.3. Remember, it's logarithmic. A 0.6 is, like what a jackhammer might do, or I'm sure you've had these times where where you've heard an empty dump truck going down the road near you and bumpity bump makes a racket, and you feel it. I used to live near a busy road. I swore I'd never live near one again because you wake up in the middle of the night, you feel the ground shaking.
Sure.
So if you have a 230,000-ton building, Building 7, slamming to the ground, it should be like raining dump trucks. It was essentially a non-seismic event. Folks did not hear anything. There's a video of a woman being interviewed, and the photographer has her in the view with Building 7 behind her. And in the middle of the interview, the building starts dropping. He goes, whoa, 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 whoa. Didn't hear anything.
Dr. Judy Wood, I know you've got a whole classroom scratching their head saying, wow, you're right. We'll be right back. Class, we've learned several things so far in the last 3 broadcasts. We learned that there was not a lot of heat, but there was a lot of wind when the towers went away. We learned that the feeling that you have when you're standing on the street and a dump truck goes by, you can feel the ground shake. That did not happen, according to the witnesses and according to the seismic events. That didn't happen. And we learned about round holes in windows of the nearby firehouse. And those round holes are on page 63 of Where Did the Towers Go? When you see these, what you'll see is holes like you've never seen in glass before. You've never seen glass break like this. You've never seen rounded holes, and I'm sure you've never seen a double pane window where the outer pane is smashed with rounded holes, but the inner pane is intact. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Dr. Judy Wood, please continue.
I'd like to read a quote by Michael Ober, an EMT who was there. He said, "I don't remember the sound of the building hitting the ground. Someone told me that it was measured on the Richter scale. I don't know how true that is. If the building is hitting the ground that hard, how do I not remember the sound of it?" That's striking. Are you saying that about the towers?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you think of Building 7, that's like, 10,000 to 20,000 dump trucks, big dump trucks. And you don't hear or feel it. This videotape of somebody being interviewed. Of course, the sound pickup on the camera is working because you hear the interviewee talking, and right behind the interviewee, you see Building 7, and it starts heading to the ground. And I don't know if it's the photographer or the interviewer holding the camera, suddenly says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" He's just shocked because this building's dropping, but you don't hear anything. That's striking. So the buildings went away. And as we'll learn, Building 7, there was just an outer shell left by that point in the day. But kind of recapping on this, I've got some pictures in the book of standing, from the very top of Towers 1 and 2, looking over down there, way down there at Building 7. And you look way down the street, there's 3 lanes of traffic between Building 7 and the post office. And after Building 7 went away, you can see that the debris didn't even fully cover the sidewalk going up to the post office. How on earth does that happen? 47-story building goes away, it doesn't completely spill across the street. It did, cover some of the streets the other direction, but not that direction. It was quite amazing. And I've been there and, look at the side. If you're ever in Manhattan, go up to the side of the post office that was facing Building 7. You don't see huge pockmarks in it, or it doesn't look machine gun fired. Now, at one point or another, I'm sure there's a pickup truck with a pole sticking out the back that may have backed into the building, but you might have a spot here or there, but it's not like a building across the street just exploded. Because if you have bombs going off in there, you should have window glass, all sorts of stuff shooting out and hitting adjacent buildings. And that did not happen. The building just, dropped down and left this little heap, and the heap was not big enough to account for what had been there. It just was the outer facade, basically, that was left, and a bunch of dust and dirt. By the next day, you had a pile of mud there. Now, how did the building turn into mud? Then there's, so there wasn't enough of a seismic impact for any of those 3 buildings to account for the mass of the building slamming to the ground.
Class, please share this broadcast with your friends and family. It's going to open a lot of eyes. And this is broadcast 103 of Where Did the Towers Go? It looks like we're going to get to broadcast 116 in order to finish this. We've had 101, 102. This was Where Did the Towers Go? 103. drjudywood.com. If you want to stop at usapreparedness.com, you can click on the link. It'll take you right to our website. Dr. Judy Wood, thank you so much. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next?